saving this for rainy day.
Before we begin, I just want to acknowledge the work of our staff on both sides who have helped with this hearing. We appreciate your work, and to make it known that we have one of our staffers, Charity, who has done a lot of work on this. She could not be here today because of an illness. We look forward to her return, but she did a lot of great research, and I just want to acknowledge that for the record, actually. So thank you, and we're going to go to our second panel of witnesses, and I would like to introduce them. We'll start with Ms. Kelly Cobb. Welcome, Ms. Cobb. Kelly Cobb is a survivor of E. coli poisoning and has come here today to share her story with us. Her husband, Matt Cobb, serves in the United States Marines, and they're parents of 2 young children. Mr. Scott Horsfall, did I pronounce that right? Is the Chief Executive Officer of the California Leafy Greens Marketing Board. Mr. Horsfall has served as Chairman of the United States Agricultural Export Development Council, was a member of the Agricultural Trade Advisory Committee for Fruits and Vegetables, and is past Chairman of the Produce Marketing Association's International Trade Conference. Mr. Dale Koch. Welcome, Mr. Horsfall. Mr. Koch, welcome. Mr. Koch is a farmer and a member of the Community Alliance with Family Farmers. Mr. Koch is also the founder and president of Koch Farm, a produce cooling, storage, and shipping company located in San Juan Bautista, California, which represents local California organic growers and selling throughout the U.S. and Canada. He's also a partner in Jardines, a diversified organic farming operation growing on approximately 500 acres in Monterey and San Benito, California counties. The 6th generation of his family, born in California to work in agriculture, he pioneered spring mix lettuce and was instrumental in developing its market. Ms. Caroline Smith Duwal, is that the right pronunciation? Welcome. Ms. Duwal is the Director of Food Science at the Center for Science in the Public Interest, where she is a leading consumer analyst on reform of laws and regulations governing food safety. Since 1999, she's maintained and annually published a list of foodborne illness outbreaks organized by Food Source that now contain over 15 years of outbreak reports and has presented at numerous conferences. She's a co-author of the book, Is Our Food Safe? A Consumer's Guide to Protecting Your Health and the Environment, and has authored numerous papers on food safety. I want to thank the witnesses for their presence here today. It's the policy of our Committee on Oversight and Government Reform to swear in all witnesses before they testify. I would ask that you rise, raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you very much. Let the record reflect that each of the witnesses have answered in the affirmative. As with panel 1, I ask that each witness give an oral summary of his or her testimony. I'd like to see you keep that summary, maximum 5 minutes in duration. Any testimony that you want to add beyond that, your entire statement will be in the record. Anything you want to send to this committee within a few days, we'll get that in the record as well. Your complete written statement will be in the record. Now, Ms. Cobb, welcome. I'd like you to be our first witness. And would you please begin? And I would, before you start, just pull that microphone a little bit closer because we want to make sure we hear everything you say. Thank you.
There you go. In May 2008, I was busy as a stay-at-home mom to my 2 children, Liberty, who was 3, and Matthew, who was 1 at the time. We were in Washington visiting family from California. Matt wasn't.
I'm going to interrupt you. I'm going to ask staff to take the responsibility of making sure that the microphone is close enough so that the witnesses can be heard. And frankly, I don't want to have to bring that up in a hearing again.
It's directional, so you have to close it and talk right into it. Sorry, that's okay.
Do you want me to start over?
And just please speak. You have a very soft voice, but it's really important that we need to hear what you're saying. So why don't you begin at the top?
Okay. In May 2008, I was busy as a stay-at-home mom raising my two children, Liberty, who was 3, and Matthew, 1. We were visiting family in Washington from California. We were there without my husband because he was serving as a Marine in Iraq for the second time. On May 10th, my mom invited me to go to a banquet dinner with her and some of her friends. Little did I know by accepting her invitation, I would be changing my life forever. That night, I ate a salad that was contaminated with E. coli. My mom, my children, and her friends that were there with us happened to sit at the same table. I just happened to pick the seat that was contaminated. My children were there with us. My son was on my lap, but luckily he didn't eat greens at the time. On May 10th, I was getting ready for our drive back to California. I went to bed that night with a stomach ache and woke up on May 16th with diarrhea and the most painful stomach cramps that occurred every 10 minutes until my stool turned to blood at about 5 o'clock. I then proceeded to go to the ER where they just said that I had a bacterial infection. I went home and was not able to hold down water or the medicine that they gave me, and I returned to the hospital. 2 days later, I was told that I had the E. coli, and that was the cause of the illness, that it wasn't the bacterial well, it was bacteria, but not what they thought. I was discharged from the hospital only to return a couple days later because I developed a condition of HUS and was told at that time that my kidneys were only functioning at 50%. I was then started on plasmapheresis where they cycled out my blood and put in the new stuff. Over the time that I was in the hospital, I had over 50 blood draws, 2 ultrasounds, a CAT scan, a colonoscopy, 7 IVs, a central line in my neck, and 4 units of whole blood and 80 units of plasma. Both my husband and my father were in Iraq at the time. I had to send a Red Cross to my husband to let him know that what was going on. He was unable to come home. I had the kids. I was the only caretaker with him being gone. So my mom took over that responsibility and set up child care for them while she was at work. They came to see me at the hospital every day, and they didn't understand why I wasn't able to go home with them, why they couldn't stay with me. They were so young that they didn't understand what was going on. There were several times that I didn't think I was going to make it because of how sick I was. I remember on one day, I think it was the 28th, I had an allergic reaction to some pain medication that I was given, and I got intense chest pain. And I remember blacking out and not really knowing what was going on. And I honestly thought I was going to die right there at the hospital bed. My husband was in Iraq, my father was in Iraq, the kids were at home, and that I wouldn't be there with them anymore. And with that, I was able to really focus on what the nurses were telling me. And they gave me another medication to help with the reaction. From that incident, from the E. coli, I no longer eat any produce that I can't see being washed myself. I have gone to restaurants and asked them how they prepare their salads. I clean everything from a bag of lettuce to a watermelon, because when you cut through it, it's going to hit your fruit. The time I have with my family means so much more to me now, because I know that at any time it can be taken away from you. I'm honestly surprised with how sick I got that I'm here today. If anything, I would want the parties that at fault in my particular case to know that, they took me away from my kids for 2 weeks, and that's a time that they'll never get back. My son was 1. He developed every day that I was gone. He came to the hospital saying new words every day, doing new things. And I felt the pain that I can't describe to you the pain that I was in, because I don't have a comparison that I could give to you. I would rather, I said I'd rather break bones than go to that, I would rather have a broken arm right now than go through the pain that I felt in E. coli, because I don't have a comparison to actually give to you on what I felt. And, it could be their family. It could have just as easily been one of my kids, and had it been, it would have been devastating to them what I went through.
Thank you very much for coming here to testify. We're certainly going to be having some questions of you when we go to that phase of this hearing. At this point, I'd like to ask Mr. Horsfall to proceed for 5 minutes. Thank you very much. Well, before you proceed, I want to welcome some of our visitors here from China and Macau. Thank you for being here. So please proceed.
Thank you, and good afternoon, Chairman Kucinich and Ranking Member Jordan. I'm happy to be here. I am always happy to talk about our program. I'll get to my statement. I would express to Ms. Cobb that what she went through does not fall on deaf ears in our industry. Shortly after I started this job, the USA Today ran a recap. It was a year after the original outbreak, and they presented the stories of the 4 or 5 people who had died because they ate spinach. And I know, because I work with this industry, that they take that to heart. They are trying to do everything they can do so that there aren't more victims, so that we can reduce that risk as much as possible. So I've used part of my time, but the Leafy Greens marketing agreement was established in 2007. It is a mechanism, quite simply, for verifying through mandatory government audits that farmers of leafy greens follow a rigorous set of food safety standards. We are an instrumentality of the state of California, and we operate with oversight from the California Department of Food and Agriculture. Although the leafy greens industry had always prioritized food safety, in the aftermath of that outbreak in 2006, farmers and shippers and processors recognized that more effort was needed to protect public health. The question was how to do it, and a lot of different approaches were looked at, including regulation at both the state and national level, marketing orders, and a marketing agreement. And the decision was ultimately made to go with the tool that was most readily available, which was a marketing agreement. It is a voluntary organization, but it does have the force of government behind it. Our members, when they do join, it is mandatory that they follow the rules of the program. And the idea was to use this marketing agreement. It also has the flexibility to change and amend the program as we get new research. And you've talked about research a lot already this morning, and we are keenly interested in research that's being done so that we can make the program better. That flexibility is actually one of the key benefits of the LGMA structure. Our program is focused on prevention, on preventing the introduction of pathogens into leafy greens fields and farms. We applaud the Obama administration and the President's Food Safety Working Group for their focus on prevention and their approach to improving food safety. On July 7th, in their press conference, we were happy to hear Vice President Biden and Health and Human Services Secretary Sebelius talk about prevention as job number 1. I was asked to talk about where our metrics came from. As the LGMA was being developed, there was a parallel effort to create a set of food safety practices and standards, sometimes referred to as good ag practices or metrics. They were developed by university and industry scientists as well as other food safety experts, farmers and shippers. Those standards were reviewed by FDA and the USDA and other state and federal health agencies. They cover the major risk areas that have been identified by FDA and other food safety experts. Practices include careful attention to site selection for growing fields based on farm history and proximity to animal operations, appropriate standards for irrigation, water and other sources of water, prohibition of raw manure and the use of only certified safe fertilizers, and of course good employee hygiene in fields and harvesting. Our members are subject to mandatory audits by the California Department of Food and Agriculture to ensure that they are in compliance with the program. Those auditors are USDA trained, and the process that we use is a USDA certified audit process. Our members face penalties if they are not in compliance, up to and including decertification from the program, which can lead to serious, significant economic repercussions for the company. From July 23rd of 2007, when we first began our auditing, we have done over 1,000 government audits of our members, and those continue today even as we speak. We all know that maintaining food safety vigilance is crucial to the future of the produce industry, and while there is still very much to do and we're not done, I believe that the leafy greens industry is doing more to provide a safe, wholesome, delicious product now than they ever have before. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Horsfeld. Mr. Koch, you may proceed for 5 minutes. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chairman Kucinich and Ranking Member Jordan. Thank you for inviting me to here today. I've been asked to address the impacts of California leafy green metrics on farming practices. For growers in California, it's estimated that the economic impacts are on the order of about $18,000 per year on average per farm. It would be higher for larger farms and possibly less for smaller farms. Growers have to, of course, do testing of water, fertilizer, soil amendments, and anything else that goes on to the crop. They have to document all of this. They have to be aware of animal incursions, pay attention to vegetation, and then also provide some kind of traceability. Traceability is not such an issue for a grower like ourselves. Organic growers have had to be able to trace product for years. There's also been prohibitions against manure use for organic production for years, and compost. There's no sewage sludge or other kinds of toxic chemicals you use. But organic growers are facing significant issues with the push for the regulators to have to ban wildlife and non-crop vegetation, things like windbreaks and habitat, which are things that are supposed to be encouraged by organic laws that pertain to maintaining your certification. The environmental impacts often vary depending on the inspector and his interpretation of the metrics. There are certain companies that use their own metrics, which are called super metrics in the industry. Wildlife, non-crop vegetation, and water bodies are normally viewed as food safety risks. A lot of environmentally positive projects have been abandoned or by growers who have been threatened with the loss of the ability to sell their crops. Windbreaks, vegetated filter strips, tailwater reuse reservoirs, grassed roadways, vegetated ditches have been removed to comply with, the inspectors that come out to check on the crop. Many fields have deer and pig fencing, but some also have frog and rodent fencing, even though those haven't been found to be a vector of pathogens. Some of the fields for leafy greens use traps, poison traps for rodents. Secondary poisoning of raptors and owls can occur with this. And a lot of these practices are more based on the processors having problems pulling them out of the harvested crop because of the nature of the harvest of the crop than it has to do with being a food safety issue. Practically, this has been a big step backwards for environmental protection. It was just starting to move forward on farms. There's a lot bit more money and time that farmers have to spend trying to comply with these metrics and document this. The majority of the disease-related outbreaks, food disease-related outbreaks that are associated with leafy greens come from pre-cut, processed products. There's some kind of failure during that process to make it ready to eat, or to make it clean enough so you don't have the pathogens. Salad processors tend to point to the fields as being the issue. It's very difficult for farmers to grow a sterile crop in an open field. You do have, we have always had employee hygiene. We're concerned about our compost, and we don't use manure. We test our water and our fertilizer, as many farmers do, just to make sure that you're not part of the problem. Leafy green farmers are now in the unenviable position of having to pay for and comply with a roster of unproven safety metrics and attempting to grow pathogen-free crops, and being held potentially liable for it. The California Leafy Green marketing agreement has made steps in the right direction, I think, for the processed product that it should be representing. I don't know that marketing agreements are an appropriate way to provide food safety, whether they be a state or national. They are, in my mind, they are something that focuses on marketing product rather than on actual, conditions of growing product. This being said, if this were to be moved in that direction, if the focus was just on processed food, you would reduce a lot of impact on. There are a lot of farmers that don't grow leafy greens that go into bags, and they would be, if the focus was just on the processed arena, you could exempt them. Right now, and I was there when they started having the meetings to decide about leafy greens in California. They included specific vegetables, and I asked why they were just including a few vegetables. There was no answer, because they didn't differentiate whether it was a whole head or a bunched product. It was just, we're going to include these vegetables. And the only reason I can come up with is that it's something to enhance their competitive edge, because it gives them a marketing advantage if you need to adhere to these metrics and you kind of raise the bar. A lot of farmers might not be able to make that.
I want to thank the gentleman for his testimony. Your entire statement will be included in the record.
Okay.
And as someone who's been so involved in the development of this industry, we appreciate your presence here. Chair recognizes Ms. Smith-DeWall for 5 minutes. And after your testimony, we're going to go to a round of questions of the panel. You may proceed.
Thank you very much, Chairman Kucinich, and also Representative Jordan. My name's Caroline Smith-DeWall. I direct the Food Safety Project for the Center for Science in the Public Interest. CSPI has concerns about the increasing use of marketing orders as a vehicle for regulating safety. 15 different agencies administer 30 different laws that regulate food safety in the U.S. today, and marketing orders really represent a further fractioning of this already widely fractured system. Foodborne illness outbreaks linked to fresh produce are among the major public health problems when it comes to food safety. And leafy greens and salads are among the top food categories, along with beef, poultry, and seafood, that cause both outbreaks and illnesses. In addition, the average size of outbreaks linked to produce tends to be larger, so they tend to affect more people. The importance of robust and reliable food safety practices on the farm cannot be understated. Leafy greens, once contaminated, can support, grow, and spread pathogens until they're consumed. Chlorination and other post-harvest controls can help reduce cross-contamination between different lots of salad, for example, but they don't make contaminated product that comes in from the farm contaminated, truly safe to eat. In fact, scientists have shown how bacteria can inhabit the washing systems used for bagged lettuce, and transfer bacteria from a contaminated lot really onto a full day's production of leafy greens, of salads. While FDA has jurisdiction over on-farm food safety, it really has not acted as an effective regulator. And they've been using for at least the past 10 to 15 years the concept of guidance, unenforceable guidance to the industry instead of regulations. But the absence of enforceable rules leaves a significant hole in the fabric of food safety, allowing and even encouraging the industry to weave standards of its own design. The Agricultural Marketing Service has served as a friendly regulator of choice when food safety problems arise. At AMS, the food industry can draft their own rules called marketing orders or agreements to best suit their needs. But AMS is not equipped to monitor the safety of food. The primary focus of AMS is with the promotion of food products. And the mechanisms that it uses are limited in terms of their geographic scope, and often they're completely voluntary. These are voluntary systems, and farmers have to agree, and the handlers have to agree to comply. So they're limited to U.S. companies. Sometimes they're limited to companies just in the state of California. And this is particularly troubling when you consider that consumers, 13% of our diet is from imported produce. So a huge amount of produce is never going to be subject to these marketing orders. AMS oversees marketing orders for 22 different commodities, including things like almonds and shell eggs. And these programs can really instill a false sense of security, both for the industries involved and for consumers, because they really are quality programs. They're not based on safety. But given the absence of rulemaking at FDA, it's not really surprising that in the aftermath of the 2006 spinach outbreak, the leafy green industry turned to AMS to create these stronger rules. I just want to note that these standards really do create uncertainty. And they give rise to the private standards, which are actually the complaint of many of the growers today. The growers today are saying these standards are too burdensome. But let me be clear, these aren't mandatory standards. They're not FDA standards. They don't apply to imports. So it's critically important that we actually get a system in place that will protect the public. The Food Safety Enhancement Act, which is before the House of Representatives, addresses this issue head-on. It requires FDA to consider both the food safety and the environmental impacts when promulgating regulations for food production. It requires the standards to take into account small-scale and diversified farming, wildlife habitat, conservation practices, watershed protection, and organic production methods. This is all in the legislation that's before the House. This provides an appropriate focus on public safety. It gives the farmers and consumers both an opportunity to weigh in on these standards, which we don't have today with the AMS standards, and it would protect the sustainable and organic farming communities that we all value. These are the type of standards that consumers cannot live without. Thank you.
Thank you very much. By the way, just an update, the bill that was voted on did not receive the required two-thirds, so it'll end up going back for some work. And some of the concerns that were expressed by members who voted against it is that they were concerned about the effect of the bill on small farmers and organic farmers. So I think that the Center, which endorsed the bill, needs to take heed of the concerns that are expressed. And I think if we do that, perhaps when the bill comes back out to the floor, we can see it pass. Thank you. Well, that means we'll have 5 minutes each of us for questions. Hold on a minute. This is House Democratic Cloak on 2 bells, pars 5 bells at 4:24 p.m.
Advise members they have 15 minutes to record their vote on suspending the rules and passing H.R. 3357 to restore sums to the Highway Trust Fund. This is a 15-minute recorded vote. This will be followed by 3 postponed 5 minutes.
Well, that really does mean we should move this along. I just want to thank Ms. Cobb. How are you feeling, by the way?
I'm fine now.
How many years ago was this?
It was May 2008.
And have you felt any after effects other than the
No.
fact that you're not really keen on eating certain products?
Yeah, other than at home. No, there's no. I am at a higher risk of cardiovascular disease later in life and urinal type issues, urinary tract. But as of right now, I've had none of that since that same summer.
We're glad you're here.
Thank
and
you.
I think people need to, there needs to be a public face of somebody who's dealt with this, and you've dealt with it, and it takes a lot of courage to come before a congressional committee to relate your experience, so we appreciate that you're here.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
The other thing I want to note is when Mr. Horsfall began his statement, I was impressed that you said that Ms. Cobb's testimony doesn't fall on deaf ears. That was a real, what I saw as a unrehearsed response to hearing what you had to say. And I just want you to know I appreciate that, because sometimes we get people come in here with a story that can be very difficult, and the individuals who may have some responsibility generally in that area seem to be impassive about it, and you showed that some concern, and I think that's that speaks well. I'd like you to address the concern about some of CalMA's metrics and the arbitrariness of them. Your auditor must find that the adjacent land to a field of green must be free from compost operations within 400 feet of the crop edge. What only requires that the adjacent land free from grazing to the land's domestic animals within 30 feet of the crop edge. What's the justification for allowing domestic animals, the animal waste products of which are a component of compost, to be closer to the crop edge than a compost operation?
The LGMA program is, the metrics are based entirely on risk assessments, and I think that's in keeping with FDA guidance and
well,
I know I'm getting to it. Pardon me.
Go ahead.
The compost operations are considered to be a very high risk situation in terms of pathogens. We also have significant buffer zones if there's a confined animal feeding operation where you have a large number of animals of risk in a field. That also requires.
Remember, you got domestic animals closer to the crop edge than the compost operation.
Because the risk assessment tells us that there's a lower risk involved if you've got a couple of animals on a farm.
Let's look at the 2006 spinach incident. Isn't it true that the field identified as the source of a contaminated spinach was less than a couple hundred feet from where domestic animals grazed and shaded themselves?
I don't know that for sure, but
well, let's
I'll
check
take
it
your
out,
word for
okay,
it.
and see if we can. Maybe you could look at
sure.
that. Maybe we could come to some kind of conclusion if there's any contradiction there. Isn't it true that CalMA's auditors would not today find any problem with growing spinach intended for the ready-to-eat market, growing a couple hundred feet from the land where cattle grazed, exactly the conditions present in the 2006 spinach incident?
It would depend on the number of cattle that were there, and I don't have those numbers in front of me, but in that particular case, the final report, as I recall, the feces that was found that had the same fingerprint was over a mile away.
Should CalMA be tougher on the processors who make the bag lettuce than it currently is?
I think processors, if I could address that, processors are under the jurisdiction of FDA. They
what
are
about CalMA?
they are already inspected.
We're looking at possible nationalization of this. Should CalMA be tougher on these processors? You've heard testimony here. What do you think?
Did you say should cattlemen?
Should CalMA be tougher on the processors?
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not used to that.
Who make the bag lettuce than it currently is?
I think that processors need to be regulated just as heavily as growers do, and that regulation, I believe, is in place for FDA.
Appreciate that. I just want to do one more question here. Mr. Koch, you're the father of the spring mix. Spring mix helped pre-cut packaged leafy greens become a vegetable consumers like and eat in increasing portions, significant health contribution, but you're also a critic of the ready-to-eat leafy green industry. In your opinion, is there a way for the American public to get the convenience and health benefits of pre-cut packaged vegetables without the harm to farmers you mentioned in your testimony?
Yeah, just a point of clarification, developed the concept of spring mix, never put it in bags, and it was never ready to eat. It was a field-run product. It was washed, cooled, and packed, dried and packed into 3-pound boxes. But it wasn't, I always had serious reservations about how that product was displayed, and I didn't ever want to go into...
what would be the long-term results, Mr. Koch, in your opinion, on the environment if CalGMA is nationalized in its current form?
In its current form, I think it'll affect too many growers of lettuce and cabbage and kale and chard, the things that are traditionally harvested as whole heads or bunched items, because they don't make a differentiation between it. Those things haven't had any outbreaks associated with them. People, they often have a kill step associated because people heat them up before they eat. They steam them or boil them.
I've got some thank you. I have some follow-up questions to Ms. Smith-DeWall. We're going to put them in writing.
Okay.
And I'm going to go
Terrific.
now to Mr. Jordan. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief as well, since we have a vote pending. Let me too thank Mrs. Cobb for being here. And how are the little ones doing? They doing fine?
Oh, yeah. Matthew doesn't remember he was too young. Liberty still remembers, and we'll talk about when I got sick from a salad. She knows what it was from. For a while, she would tell people not to be afraid of a blood machine because she remembers coming in while I was having a transfusion done. But overall, they're doing well.
Well, let me also thank your family for their service to our country. Thank you all for being with us. Now, let me just get a couple of basic. Where's your home state, Mrs. Cobb?
My home state is Washington.
Okay. Mr. Horsfall, the program is completely voluntary. Is that right? There are 120
yes.
people who represent 99% of the volume. I'm looking at I think this came off your website for LGMA. 120 handlers, 99% of the volume of California leafy greens. That they're all voluntary. Those 120 who joined.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And what's the assessment? And how's that determined again?
We assess our members based on the volume that they ship. It's $0.015 per 24-count equivalent box.
And I just want to be clear, are big producers part of it, or these are the people who, in other words, are the farmers part of the organization, or is it just the folks who take the farm product and then package it?
Our members are handlers. They are the people who put product into commerce. The
Are
majority
some of the
of them,
handlers- are some of the
majority
handlers-
of them are growers as well.
They're both.
Yeah.
So some are both. Some of them actually produce the product and handle
Absolutely.
it. So right from the field right to their operation, or it could be around the same premises.
Mm-hmm. And they sell to each other.
Pardon?
And they sell to each other as well in the industry quite a bit.
Okay. And since you've come into existence, which was 06, 07, what year?
07.
Have there been any outbreaks of E. coli or any problems?
There have been outbreaks that have been reported. I don't believe the health authorities have conclusively finished their investigations yet to say where product got contaminated, but there was a small outbreak in Washington State that Ms. Cobb was affected by. Last year there was an outbreak in Michigan.
So can you definitively say that we've seen an improvement in that there have been less problems since your organization has been formed, or is that anyone's guess?
The answer is yes. Fewer people have gotten sick tied to lettuce and leafy greens in the last 2 years than, say, in the 2 or 3 years before that. Mm-hmm. But I don't take that as a metric. Mm-hmm. I think we still, if anybody's getting sick, then we still have to figure out how to make the program better. Okay. And that's where the research comes in. Again,
okay. Now, Mr. Koch, are you you're a farmer and a handler? I mean, are you part of this organization? Your farm, your operation?
I'm not. There's 2 different entities. One is a sales, shipping, cooling company. The other is a farming company. The farming company contracts with a handler that is signatory to that, and we grow some crops, cilantro, dill, and parsley in this case, for inclusion in a salad, that they want to be grown under those metrics. So we do that part. Otherwise, we have a diverse crop mix. There are only a few things that would be considered leafy greens, and I've resisted because I think it's the principle is wrong of this agreement, and so I didn't want to. It's cost me the ability to sell into Canada because they won't accept product, even though we're organic and we test soil and water. And they won't accept product that's not if you're not signatory to the Leafy Green Marketing Agreement. I don't know. I'd prefer not to go there. Have to. I was hoping that something would become a little more logical. So focus on the process.
Just as a country boy from Western Ohio, who didn't grow up on a farm, but we live out in the middle of my wife's family's farm. It seems to me the problem is, you think about whether the product is grown close to composting site or whatever. I remember when they used to spread manure on the field. So it's just like, it seems to me the problem has to be after the product's taken out of the field. That's just common sense. But maybe I'm just a country boy.
I think you're right.
Something.
And the product has got issues. The slide that you showed about the bagged, it's a great concept to give people something that's ready to eat, but it's a perfect incubator. How do you keep that? If you can't sterilize it, how do if you've got any little pathogen and you break the cold chain, even a customer just taking it out to their car and then driving home, it's potentially it's a difficult issue. A product to get to market. Safely, I think.
We have to vote. Thank you all for coming. I'm sorry we didn't get a chance to.
I want to thank Mr. Jordan. I want to thank the witnesses for being here. I'm Dennis Kucinich, chairman of the Domestic Policy Subcommittee. Mr. Jordan is the ranking member. Our hearing today has been Ready to Eat or Not, examining the impact of leafy greens marketing agreements. We've had 2 panels. The testimony has been very important. We appreciate your participation. This committee stands adjourned. Thank you.